Let's begin our meditation today. Close our eyes and get into a body position that enables you to get in touch with the core of your being. That place in you that cannot be violated. That place in you where you're strong. You are unmovable. Find that place in you. Got in touch with the incredible music that you have heard here this morning. That place in your heart that is so grateful that one day someone became inspired enough to turn the vibrations, the sun and the moon and the flowers and the puppy dogs into something we call music. Connect up with that light you have seen in the eyes of someone when you walked into this space this morning. Find that part of yourself that is so grateful that you have been privileged to know that person and to observe the Christ within them, friend or stranger. Get in touch with that space within yourself that already this morning you saw or experienced something that just made you want to laugh out loud. And be grateful. That someone had the audacity one day, in the midst of something that was not going quite right, that said, I think it's time to create something called laughter. Get in touch with that space in you this morning that feels a bit empty. Maybe even a bit sad. Maybe a bit confused. Maybe even a bit angry. And find that space in yourself that is so grateful that when you put all of those ingredients into the big bowl and mix them around, they are the soil from which faith is born. Oh yes, this day, this moment, lift up your eyes and say aloud, I am grateful. I am grateful. And you are indeed a sight for my sore eyes. It has been since January when I was with this incredible community called Community on the Hill. And I have dearly missed you. And what a ride we've had this year. In January, when I was here, I was celebrating with you that a little girl named Lily had come to live with us. You helped me to celebrate that gift God had given to my husband and I late in our lives. We call our old age comfort. In February, Lily informed us that she was shopping for other parents. Seemed that we had rules in our house. She was very clear that what she would prefer would be to find a home where she could do exactly what she wanted anytime she wanted to. We had been told to expect that she would test us, and indeed she did. That little girl found the jugular. So we spent a good deal of time with some very trusted counselors and therapists, and we negotiated a settlement. In March, Lily had an emergency appendectomy. So Wes and I celebrated our 25th anniversary on the fold-out couch in the Texas Children's Hospital. And then in April, I went into the ER to get some help with the pain of what I thought was a pinched nerve. And an hour later, they were rolling me in for brain surgery. First surgery went very, very well. We thought I was going home soon, but I developed an infection and then some other complications. And those of you who are following on Facebook, there were a few very dicey days there. And we have spent the rest of that year between April and now in a state of recovery. As you can see, how would you know? I tell people I'm now 90% prayer. Our theme for this month is gratitude. When I come to this church and they ask me to preach on gratitude, I just say, what a tough assignment. It's like preaching to the choir. What could I possibly have to share with you? But today I just want to share my story with you. A friend of mine called me a few months after the surgery, and she said, Margaret, what have you processed so far? What have you discovered in this experience that you had? Where God was in it all? I said, Teresa, it is much too soon for that. I do know one thing. I know that in the weeks preceding that experience, I've been feeling very heavily weighed down by some of the things that were going on in Lily's life. It was becoming clear to us, in spite of that winning smile, in spite of that resilience this child has, that there are going to be some real issues. But what I discovered in the hospital is that you just cannot carry around a heavy burden and a Foley catheter at the same time. One of those things has got to go. And I really needed that catheter. The other thing I discovered is that a story that I had known and loved since childhood suddenly took on new meaning for me. I'd like to read it here for you today. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, "Take care of him, and whatever more you spend I will repay when I come back." The scholars would tell you that this is a story about how Jesus was trying to get somebody who was already a really good person to expand his definition of what it meant to be a good neighbor. And just to kind of drive in the stake just a little bit more, he picked someone called a Samaritan, someone that good man would have despised. Someone that when he even heard the word Samaritan would have wanted to spit on the ground. And yet that was the person put up in front of him as the role model of what it might look like to truly fulfill the requirements of God. This would have been very similar to what we would say today if someone who was Israeli living on the West Bank would have someone tell them, if you really want to know what it's like to be a good person, look over there at that Palestinian, or vice versa. Or to bring it a little closer to home, what someone who is a staunch Republican would say if somebody said, if you really want to know what it means to be a good person, look at that Democrat, or vice versa. But as I have been recovering and I've been contemplating this story, I realized that I think Jesus was telling much more than that story. For I found in this story a parable of my own journey through a devastating traumatic experience. And I find in each of the characters of this story, not just the Good Samaritan, something that we can learn about how to be grateful under difficult circumstances. Let's look first at this person who was the victim. He did not wake up that morning saying, I know what's going to happen today. It was known that that was a dangerous road, but you don't think it will ever happen to you. It was not just the trauma of being taken by surprise, being beaten and left half dead. It was also just the unexpectedness of the whole event itself, not just the physical wounds, but the traumatic things that happened to us cause us deep emotional wounds. And so when that Good Samaritan did come by and pour oil and wine on those wounds, it was not just a physical healing that he brought with him, but for the first time, the emotional healing could begin, because when someone cares for us in kindness, it opens up our hearts again to the possibility that life is still good, that there is still hope. When those footsteps of the Good Samaritan draw close, his initial response must have been, oh, they're coming to finish me off. And so there's also the unexpectedness of this stranger coming, and instead of doing him more harm, turns that situation and provides love to those emotional and spiritual wounds. And that was my experience throughout all of this illness and journey to recovery. I cannot tell you how many people were praying, how many people picked up Lily, took her into their home for the evening, took care of her school activities, helped her with her homework, encouraged my husband when he was trying to give care to me and to her. So many people were praying. I could just, when I was lying there, I could just tell where the prayer was coming from. You know, I connect through Facebook with some of my friends back when I was in high school and college that are still good fundamentalist Baptists. And when you're lying there in a hospital room and you get hit by a good Baptist prayer, he say, you got to get the devil out of this situation. And in that moment, it feels pretty good. And then there were the prayers of those in my own home church. All those people are just dripping with compassionate, sentimental love. There is nothing that they can't think can be healed with a good sloppy kiss. And as I was lying there in the hospital room, and I could tell when one of them had prayed for me, I would wipe that off my face and I would spread it all over. I tell you, that just felt real good. And I could tell when one of you from Community on the Hill prayed for me. Because a dove would fly into that room and it would tell me, all's well. All is well. Thank you. You have been my good Samaritans. I'm here today because of your prayers. And so, that victim of trauma finds gratitude even in that moment because of the kindness of strangers and friends. The Good Samaritan, when I was in the hospital room, came to me sometimes in the form of social media. One time I was lying there and I was having this hymn go through my mind and I couldn't quite get the words, and I found my phone and I texted a couple of people in a group text and I said, can anyone send me the words to "Oh Love That Will Not Let Me Go"? And just a few seconds later, a friend said, this is your lucky day. I just happened to be here at the church and I can find the hymnal. And within minutes, she had texted me all 4 verses of this glorious hymn, and I found the line I was looking for. Oh, joy that seekest me through pain. I found a poem from that great Eastern mystic, Hafiz. If one is afraid of losing anything, they have not looked into the friend's eyes. They have forgotten God's promise. The jewels you get when you meet the beloved go on multiplying themselves. They take root everywhere. Burglars hear watchdogs inside of his gifts and run. Oh, what gratitude I feel for those of you who were good Samaritans to me and my family in our darkest hour. There are some other characters in this story. I think of these 2 professional clergy people in the story, a Levite and a priest. They are set up in this story as what not to be. And it's difficult to understand, especially since it was part of Jewish law that if anyone was in distress, clergy or layperson, you would stop and give them aid. And yet here they were, expected to be role models as the men of service in the temple, but they did not stop and they did not help. I've always felt a great deal of empathy for these 2 characters. I have learned since then, in doing a little bit of study in the commentaries, that these were men that served in the temple for 7-day periods, would start on a Sabbath and end on a Sabbath. And so when the scripture says they were going down, it means that they had just finished their term of service, their 7 days in the temple, and they were headed home. So the temple was in Jerusalem, and the town where all of the Levites and priests lived was called Jericho. And this journey they were making was to go home. Can you imagine then, and feel some empathy for someone who had been serving in the temple for 7 days, wake up on the day after the Sabbath, it's time to go home. Little Susie is waiting on you because she wants you to go to her piano recital, and little Jimmy's got a soccer game. and your spouse says, get on home as quickly as you can, these kids are driving me nuts. So perhaps we can understand why when they saw the situation unfolding and saw this wounded man on the ground, that they thought, this is not going to be a 5-minute prayer and move on. This is going to be hours, perhaps days, to take care of this need. We might feel a bit of empathy that they moved on without helping. Now, in terms of professional clergy, I do not relate to this story because I had more professional clergy in my hospital room than anybody could ever expect to have. I want to tell you one story about one of the chaplains. When I first came, I just have to be honest with you, she did not make a great first impression. She came into my room, mild-mannered, so calm. And then we talked for a few minutes, and I'm just going to confess my judgment. I just thought, man, if I really get in a bind here this week, this is not going to be one of the people I'm going to be able to talk to. I just thought she's going to listen, and she's going to nod her head in all the right places. But I have to get down to where I'm arm wrestling with God. She's going to be useless. Now, I woke up one afternoon then, and perhaps the only time I ever woke up from one of my narcotic-induced naps, and discovered my husband was not at my bedside. He had gone to be with Lily at one of her school events. But that moment gave me a chance to just take stock of my situation. I had tubes and wires running into my body, some bringing in the antibiotics and the fluids. I had things taking fluids out. I had been lying in bed for days, flat on my back, with an oxygen mask on, stiff as a board. I was in excruciating pain. And when I saw what had happened to me in that moment of clarity, I jammed my finger into that nurse's button, and when she finally answered, I said, "Get me a chaplain." And who do you think would walk into my room? Of all the chaplains at St. Luke's Hospital, it had to be her. I rolled my eyes at God. I said, "You have got to be kidding." I said to God real quick, as she was making her way over to my bedside, I said, "You send her here, she's going to get the full whammy here. I'm not going to sweet coat it for her." So she took my hand and she asked what she could do for me, and I looked into that woman's eyes and I said, "The doctors saved my life, and now they are trying to kill me." I had more to say, but she interrupted me. I do not know what happened to that meek little lamb, but suddenly she emerged as a lion. She said to me, "The doctors are here to support you. Are you Christian?" I said, "Yes." She began to spit the words of the 23rd Psalm at me. "Everyone coming as a salvo right into my pain. The Lord is your shepherd. You shall not want. He makes you lie down in green pastures. He leads you beside still waters." And by the time we got to that next phrase, an unbelievable peace came into my body as she said the words, "He restores my soul." The wonder of modern medicine saved my life, but it can be a dehumanizing experience, and I had not realized how much of my soul I had lost. But she came to me as a professional healer, and she restored my soul. What I can relate to out of this story is my experience with some of the other professional healers my doctors, my nurses. Much like those Levites and priests, they have a tremendously difficult job, and it can be a challenge for them to realize in the midst of all they can do with their technology and the drugs, that sometimes what we need from them is just a kind touch. They were amazing in their attention to me. But what I discovered there in that hospital bed, as all of us baby boomers are aging and they continue to be able to prolong our lives with technology and with drugs, there will not be enough chaplains in the world to restore all of our souls. Every doctor, every nurse, every attendant will have to become a chaplain and hold our hand to restore our souls as we are in distress. I did find some of those people in the professional healing role. A wonderful nurse named Doris. Actually, she was a physician of patient care assistant, they now call them. You know, the reason why I think that our nurses are not able to give as much loving attention as they want is because they're required now to fill in so much data in their computers. Unfortunately, not very many people are reading that data. But when Doris came into my room, she refused to do anything for me until she had read all of that data from top to bottom. And then she saw some hidden needs in that report, and she began to go to work. She brought in one of her partners, and they gave me a bath there in the bed. I tell you, they rocked me up like a little baby. She restored my soul. I had lots of people who brought me food from the cafeteria, but there was one young man that did not bring just food. When he put that tray down by me, he blessed me in a way that got me through the rest of the day. Oh, we are grateful, aren't we, for those professional healers that, despite the fact that their little Susies and Jimmies are making just as much demands on them, still take the time to communicate to us a deep love and compassion in their roles as professional healers. I am grateful for those who did so. I don't know why I've never noticed this character before, but this innkeeper has just caught my attention. You know, the Good Samaritan gets all the praise, right, for being the one who did it, but he really only spent a couple of hours with this person, got him onto the donkey and over to the inn. Can you imagine today if someone left off at a hotel or a motel, someone who was that badly injured? But this innkeeper took the wounded man in and did the long-term caregiving. That is such an important role. How many of you have ever been the long-term caregiver for an aging parent or a special needs child? It is an important role, isn't it? The doctor sent me home way too early, but afraid that I would catch another infection in the hospital. It was a wise thing to do. My husband brought me home that day, and we turned our master bedroom into a hospital room. 24/7 for the next 3 to 4 weeks, my husband was my innkeeper. I am grateful, so grateful, for those who take up the task of compassion after those who are the heroes have gone on down the road and do the really difficult and delicate work required to bring someone back to life. I am grateful for long-term caregivers. Well, there's one more character in this story. And I'll ask you a question. Should I be grateful for the thieves who came and took several months of my life? Should I be grateful to them for putting my precious daughter through agony? She thought she was losing her mother. Should I be grateful for the pain? The scriptures would tell me to be always grateful for everything. I do not yet know the answer to that question, but I do know this. I know that when I came home from the hospital, for the very first time, my daughter called me Mommy. Thank you.